Why does Michigan let a global megacorporation guzzle our groundwater for practically nothing? Where exactly is Ice Mountain?
I would have to guess that Ice Mountain is in Colorado.
Mount Rainier.
Montana.
It's Michigan spring water. The Swiss company Nestle has been pumping Michigan water under the brand Ice Mountain for 17 years, bringing the company an annual profit of some $300 million. And for billions of gallons of pristine spring water, Michigan charges Nestle less than $1,000 per year. Bottled water is more popular than ever. 10 years ago, the average American drank about 29 gallons of it per year. In 2017, that figure was up to 42 gallons.
It makes me think of my grandmother. She was 96 and a half, and she said, "Who in their right mind is gonna pay for a bottle of water?"
2 years ago, for the first time ever, bottled water topped carbonated soft drinks as America's most popular beverage. That water comes from places like Osceola Township and the city of Everett. This rural region, sitting at the gateway to northern Michigan, is part of the Muskegon River watershed.
It's a very water-rich area. It gets a lot of rainfall, and Nestle has access rights to springs in the area. The FDA says that in order for water to be labeled spring water, it has to come from a spring aquifer, which is a specific type of shallow groundwater that meets the surface somewhere.
Nestle pumps water from wells here for its brand Ice Mountain, enough for millions of bottles a day. And it's perfectly legal, thanks to the reasonable use doctrine, which holds that nobody really owns the groundwater, and everyone has the right to use it in a reasonable fashion. It's the same principle used by farms and public utilities. There's no state tax, license fee, or royalty imposed, only minor clerical fees. In Nestle's case, that's $200 per facility, for a grand total of $800 per year. Nestle also pays a residential water rate on a few wells within the city of Everett.
Water issues in Michigan are highly emotional for a lot of people. The idea that a global company of the size of Nestle can get its raw material for free doesn't sit well with a lot of people, especially because that resource, which a lot of people see as being essentially owned by the wider public, is then being turned around and sold back to the public for a profit.
It's become the new gold all over the world, and corporations are privatizing it.
Peggy Case is president of Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation, which has been protesting Nestle's practices for almost 2 decades.
The morality of these issues is just as important as the legalities. We think that water has to remain in the commons. That doesn't happen when you turn it over to a corporation like Nestle and let them make a huge profit from it.
In 2016, Nestle applied to increase pumping at its White Pine Springs well in Osceola Township, going from a maximum capacity of 150 gallons per minute to 400 gallons per minute. The public might never have known about the request if it weren't for a discovery by Grand Rapids press reporter Garrett Ellison.
I get an email from the state of Michigan, an environmental calendar. And so I saw Nestle Waters, Section 17 review, and caught my attention because obviously Nestle's got some history in Michigan. And I noticed this about 3 days before the public comment window was set to expire. Once our story went up, the public outcry was immediate and intense.
My fellow Michiganders, please do this to this document to make sure that the DEQ understands we do not want them patronizing Nestle's.
Despite the public's opposition, the permit to increase pumping was granted in 2018.
A lot of the comments that the state was receiving were in opposition to Nestle's business practice in general. The statute that regulators had to follow is pretty specific to, does this withdrawal impact the natural resources of that particular area?
The state of Michigan said its review of the permit application was the most extensive analysis of any water withdrawal permit in Michigan history.
But in every case, it was Nestle giving the data. They claim there'd be no effect whatsoever at 400 gallons per minute, and we say, no, that's not true. There's already an effect at 150.
You see that historical water line there and where the water is now?
Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation immediately filed legal action in state administrative court, claiming the permit to increase pumping was granted illegally.
Arguing about the integrity of their computer models is a diversion. The law that was put into effect says you have to have real-time data. This is the kind of work we do. This is called citizen science.
That's the pond, and this is like the mouth of the pond and the creek coming back. This is
Rhonda Huff is the former vice president of Michigan Citizens for Water Conservation and a fifth-generation Everett resident. She grew up playing in the creeks here and says they're not the same since Nestle came to town.
Well, the one behind my mom's house, which is Twin Creek, there are mud flats. I've lived on this creek, Chippewa Creek, for 27 years. Some say, well, it's the dam, but it's been dammed, and since 2010, we started noticing a lot of differences. We're getting new mud flats every single year.
A Nestle spokesperson would not go on camera for this project, but in a statement said the company takes great care to operate in a responsible and sustainable way to preserve and protect the water and surrounding environment. Nestle also put us in touch with Dave Johnson, who's lived in Everett his entire life.
I caught my first trout out of that creek when I was 8 years old. Almost 30 years later, my son caught his first trout out of the exact same creek. There's been no decline to the ecosystem, wetlands, streams, ponds. I've seen nothing but improvements.
Nestle says it has contributed more than $427 million to Michigan's economy and pays $4.8 million annually in state and local taxes.
When they come in and started purchasing that water, not at a commercial rate or a reduced rate, but at the same rate that residents pay, that brought the city back financially.
Nestle also points out that it has invested in the community here. While most of the jobs it sustains are about 40 miles away at the bottling plant in Stanwood, Nestle has funded projects in Everett, like new softball fields and wellhead protection measures, and it sponsors local festivals and fundraisers.
They've built new ball diamonds that everybody's ecstatic about, and they're nicer than what we had. Do I want them to do more? I don't know, because that's like saying we accept them, and I don't.
The state approved Nestle's request to increase pumping just days after it announced it would stop free water delivery to Flint, the Michigan city that gained global attention after lead was discovered in its drinking water.
What happened in Flint really did affect the way the people of Michigan reacted to Nestle. The idea that we have this city that can't drink its water, and just across the state a little ways, a global company is getting it for free, millions and millions of gallons per day, really just did not sit well with people.
Nestle continued donating water to Flint, and by the end of the year launched a marketing campaign promoting its contributions.
Some people have forgotten about Flint, but Nestle Waters never did.
It's a PR stunt. My take on it is that we have forced them to use some of their money to do a much more aggressive PR campaign than they ever would have had to do if we hadn't been combating them.
Nestle pumps water all over the U.S., and each state charges differently. Texas charges based on acres used. In Florida, fees and permitting can cost more than $10,000. Maryland charges nothing. There have been attempts to change the law in Michigan, to charge Nestle a license fee or tax, or to limit the amount of water it can take.
They really haven't gone anywhere because industry and agriculture and public utility are going to say, well, hold on a second. If you start changing the laws, how does that affect us? The environmental community hasn't gotten behind a pricing scheme either, out of concern that companies can come in and now they know exactly the process and how much they would have to pay. And so there's some concern that putting a kind of system in place could lead to actually more water bottling.
Nestle's plan to increase pumping is on hold as the court case against it continues. Meanwhile, this rural Michigan community is left divided.
What if we do have an issue, something that could affect these ponds and streams and groundwater? Who's going to catch it? Without Nestle here monitoring, we're going to drink those chemicals.
I go into a big store and see people hauling out Ice Mountain and it says Everett, Michigan on it, and I just want to shout, do you know where that water's coming from? Fill up a reusable bottle.
Each bottle of Ice Mountain tells a story of global capitalism and small-town politics, the environment, and consumerism. Ultimately, we're left with the question, who has the rights to this water? It was late 2016 when MLive.com broke the story about Nestle seeking to increase pumping in Everett. That legal and permitting battle continues. You can learn more about the water rights debate in Michigan and in other states at MLive.com/howwegothere.